Hi folks, HR Funk here. If you're a fan of the 38 Super cartridge, I predict you are going to love this video. This is going to be a 38 Super extravaganza of sorts, and the primary purpose for this video is to finish my review of the Iver Johnson pistol that I have here, and I conducted the shop review of this pistol a couple of weeks ago. If you missed that, go back and watch it, and you can see all the specifics about this handgun that Iver Johnson calls their model 1911A1. In that video, if you saw it, you recall that I did not go out and immediately shoot this handgun because of the weather conditions that day. And now I'm glad that I didn't. Since I had some time to wait, I managed to acquire a couple of other handguns to compare this one to, and that's part of what's going to make this a very entertaining video. Now, this pistol was loaned to me by House of Pain Munitions. Some of you might remember that. And in a subsequent trip to House of Pain, they also loaned me another 38 Super chambered handgun. This is a Tanfoglio. And this pistol is one that is set up more for competition purposes, as you see here, but I thought it would be fun to compare it to the bare bones Iver Johnson 1911A1 and see how that pistol compared against one that was meant more for competition purposes. Also, thank you to my friend ERJG1954 for loaning me this classic Colt government model 1911 chambered for the 38 Super cartridge. So I'm going to be able to compare the Iver Johnson pistol to the Colt set up in similar fashion, as well as to the Tanfoglio 38 Super pistol that I showed you a moment ago, and get a real comparison as to its capabilities and see just how it fares with these other more expensive handguns also chambered for the 38 Super cartridge. Now, for today's test, I'm going to be using two different types of 38 Super ammunition. One of them is this House of Pain load, and this is one of two loads from House of Pain that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago, and this is some pretty stout ammunition. This is a 124 grain jacketed hollow point that out of a 5-inch 1911 barrel, I was clocking at almost 1,400 feet per second. It was coming in, I think, an average of 1,380 feet per second, so this has got some steam behind it. The other is an Armscore load. This is a 125 grain load that, according to Armscore, is clocking right at about 1,200 feet per second, so it's a little bit more mild than the House of Pain load. And these are the two, as I said, that I'm going to be using. The accuracy test that I'm going to start things off with is going to be with the House of Pain ammunition, and when I get into some of the defensive drills, I'm going to be using the Armscore ammunition. So here we go, let's get right into it. When I got to the range, I set everything up, and the first order of business was that accuracy test, and I decided to extend the range a little bit. Since this is fairly hot ammunition, particularly the House of Pain ammunition, I set up at a distance of 25 yards, or at least as close as I could get to it on the range that I was using. That particular range, it's difficult to actually get a bench to 25 yards, so I was actually at about 23 yards when I shot this drill. In any case, I started things off with the Iver Johnson and fired 5 shots from that distance. Then I moved to the Colt, and last I shot the Tanfoglio. And here's how it went. Okay, folks, a couple of points I want to make about that footage you just saw. First off, with each handgun from that distance of just shy of 25 yards, I was using the exact same point of aim, and that was 6 o'clock on the center spotter target. And as you noticed, with the Iver Johnson pistol, there was only one shot hole in the video. That was this one right here that was visible. From that distance of about 25 yards, the Iver Johnson pistol is hitting almost exactly 9 inches low. So obviously the sights aren't regulated properly, and the rear sight either needs to be raised or probably should be replaced with a higher rear sight, or the front sight needs to be lowered, one or the other, to bring those into proper point of aim, point of impact. Also, when shooting the Iver Johnson pistol, you probably noticed there was a stoppage on the next to the last shot. That actually happened to me 3 times when I was on the range shooting this pistol, and it was the exact same malfunction. And on each of those occasions, what happened was the slide stop just barely engaged the slide enough to stop it in its forward movement before it could chamber the last round in the magazine. I traced that to a magazine issue with this metal form magazine, and once I swapped that out, that problem went away. So that was definitely a magazine issue. It was not a pistol issue. But I did want to explain that stoppage that you saw. The Iver Johnson pistol had the best trigger of the two 1911s that I was shooting. It was definitely very nice, and when I weighed that in the shop here, it was right around 4 pounds. It has a clean let off, and when I get to talking about the group size, it was pretty impressive in its performance. The Colt, in shooting it, just feels like a Cadillac. It just feels very, very smooth, and even though the trigger was heavier than the Iver Johnson, it just feels like a more refined pistol, and I can't quite put that into words, but I noticed that the entire time that I was shooting it, and I don't think I'm imagining that. It just seems like everything functions a little bit more smoothly on the Colt than it does with the Iver Johnson. The Tanfoglio, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, and by the way, I don't think I identified this earlier, this is the Tanfoglio Defiant Limited Pro, is a nice pistol, and you can see that it's more or less following the lines of the CZ competition pistols, so this is a CZ clone. Feels like a nice pistol to shoot, but it experienced 2 stoppages during my accuracy test, and these were not being caused by me. I did not have my thumb anywhere near the slide stop or anything else as those happen, but those were the only 2 stoppages that I experienced. I don't know how much this pistol was fired prior to today, so I don't know if those were some sort of a break-in issue, that there were a couple of stoppages early on that went away, and then during the rest of the testing I didn't experience them. I don't have any explanation other than they were both failure to feeds, and they were consecutive, one right after the other. When we look at the groups, and again, keeping in mind that the sights are not regulated properly, but just looking at the pure mechanical accuracy of the Iver Johnson, it was extremely impressive from that distance. This is a group that is just barely over 2.5 inches center to center. In fact, it measured at 2 9/16 inches from that distance. And you're going to see in a moment, after I fired this, I thought maybe this had something to do with the House of Pain Munitions ammunition. It is a hot load, and I thought maybe it was regulated, or the sights rather were regulated for something that was a little bit more moderate, and maybe that was accounting for the low point of impact. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you the second time that I shot that pistol using the Arms Corps ammunition, and I'll talk about the results of that. But as far as the House of Pain munitions go in that pistol, point of impact aside, the accuracy was very, very impressive. Again, coming in, like I said, at just a little past 2.5 inches at that distance. The Colt had a respectable group from that distance. It was not as tight as the Iver Johnson pistol. And as I said, the trigger on the Colt was noticeably heavier. I didn't weigh it, but I would say it's probably 1 pound to 1.5 pounds heavier, probably in the 5 or 5.5 pound range. Still, I ended up with a group from 23-ish yards of 3 7/8 inches, so not horrible from that distance. And again, I'm using the sights that are supplied on here. These are fixed sights. Now, these are not the factory original sights. This is an MMC unit, I believe. And They give a good sight picture. It does have a white outline, and the front sight has a white line to help give you a little bit more contrast with the sights. And as I said, the group is respectable. It's not bad. It's pretty well centered from that distance. And again, it just has that Cadillac sort of a shooting feel when I'm using the Colt. Moving to the 10 folio, I was a little disappointed in this group. This pistol has some very high visibility. I'm going to come up here, hopefully you can see this. Some very high visibility sights for target work, and I was expecting some pretty good accuracy from it. And the accuracy isn't bad. It really is pretty much on par with the Colt. The group was just ever so slightly smaller by about 1/8 of an inch center to center over and above the Colt. It came in at 3 3/4 of an inch. Slightly low, slightly to the right. That could be an ammunition situation, and it does have adjustable sights, so it would be pretty easy to dial that in. But again, I was just expecting a little bit better performance from that pistol, and again, the two malfunctions that it had still kind of go unexplained. In any case, moving on, as I said, I went back to the Iver Johnson pistol. I loaded up the 125 grain arms core ammunition, and I tried a second group to see if that would have a different point of impact. And let me show you how that went. So I wanted to get a close-up of this so it would be easy to see. The green stickers are that second group with the arms core ammunition, and it might be ever so slightly higher than the House of Pain load, but it's more or less right within, or maybe I should say right on top of, the group that I shot with the House of Pain ammunition. The second group, center to center, was almost the exact same size. It was 2.5 inches as opposed to the 2 9/16 inches of the House of Pain ammo. So this entire 10-shot group with two different types of ammunition has an overall maximum group size measured center to center of the farthest shot holes of 2 9/16 inches. That is extremely good accuracy from any handgun, but particularly basically bare bones 1911 style handgun from that distance of nearly 25 yards. I'm extremely impressed with the accuracy. I just wish the sights were different. And if this were my handgun, pretty much as quickly as I could, I would find a higher rear sight unit and swap out the factory sight for that new sight and bring that point of aim up to where it should be. And from that point forward, I think I would be very happy with the accuracy. So now it was time to move on to some more defensive-oriented drills. So I put up some new targets. I moved back to a distance of 5 yards, and from there I was firing controlled pairs with each of the handguns, once again starting with the Iver Johnson, moving to the Colt, and last the 10 Foglio. And as you'll see, when I conducted this drill, I was not really taking a lot of time getting ready or anything else. I basically got everything set, got the cameras rolling, walked back, inserted a magazine, cycled a slide, and come up and started to fire my controlled pairs. I really was trying to drive these handguns and see how well they would do when I was not taking all day in the world to get ready and take my time and all that. And here's how the controlled pairs looked. Okay, a quick point before I get into the results of the controlled pairs. You might have noticed that my targets changed, and you haven't seen these targets before in my videos. Reason for that is because I actually have a target sponsor now. How about that? I was contacted a while back by Targets Online. I don't know if you can read this down here at the bottom. And they asked if they could be my target sponsor. So I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Their targets are very, very nice. I don't know if you can tell in the video today, but when I was out at the range, I was getting some light rain and some drizzle. And there have been times when I was on the range before, on days like that, where my targets more or less turn to mush, kind of like wet tissue paper, especially if I'm trying to take them down or do anything. There have been times that I've shot or that I've been conducting firearms training and I've had someone else shoot and they hit a wet target and it just looks like confetti with things blowing out all over everywhere. These targets are made out of cardstock, similar to a playing card. So they're more or less impervious to weather conditions. That's one nice thing about them. Also, as you can see, they have actual accurate representations of potential hostile aggressors on there. I think that's very important psychologically. I talked about that several months ago in a video. In fact, I talked to the folks at Targets Online about my ideas for some targets, and they were at least going to watch the video and give my ideas some consideration, so who knows what will develop from that. In any case, you can check out their website, Targets Online, to see all their targets, and they have a lot more than just these, but these are the ones that I was using. Now, for the purposes of my video today, in case anyone thinks that I'm using different targets and that's going to somehow skew the results, the inner scoring area of these targets are all basically the exact same size and shape. There's a little bit of difference in some of the internal markings, but the overall scoring area is all the same. So I don't think there's going to be anything really different about that. But I did want to use these targets, and I did enjoy using them. I think they're very good targets. Going to the results of the controlled pairs, this is the Iver Johnson. And we can see still, even from that distance of 5 yards, we're hitting low. I was aiming in this area as I was firing those, and the shots are hitting down here. Not a bad group, but just a little bit lower. Pretty well centered left to right, but low in the chest. Moving over to the Colt, very, very nice group from the Colt. Well centered, going right to point of aim. Not difficult to keep them there. Even with that heavier trigger, again, the Colt just works. There's just something about that pistol. The Tanfoglio, or Tanfoglio, I believe, is not bad. I would say it's probably a comparable group to the Colt. The Colt is basically running accuracy-wise hand in hand with the Tanfoglio. Oh, by the way, I'm using the female target here. The last time I did that was a couple of years ago when I was still conducting the law enforcement qualification series. And I used a target that was actually the official qualification target of one of the states. I want to say maybe Colorado or Oklahoma. I don't remember now. But there was a lady that got a hold of me in the comments section and gave me what for using a target that depicted a female aggressor. And I tried to explain that was the official target, and sometimes you might be dealing with a female aggressor. Didn't matter. My name was Mud in her mind. So I don't know, if she sees this video today, I might get that same treatment again. In any case, good performance from all three pistols on that controlled pair drill. Next, I moved back to 7 yards, and from that distance, I was firing a failure drill with each of the three handguns, which is 2 shots to the body, 1 shot to the head in rapid succession. And again, pretty much as soon as I got there and inserted the magazine and cycled the slide, I came up and started to fire the drill, and here's how it went. And I've got the results of those failure drills marked with the yellow stickers. And I thought all 3 handguns did pretty well on that drill. I did raise my point of aim with the Iver Johnson to try to compensate for hitting low. And we can see that these shots are a little bit higher than they were on the previous drill where I was conducting the controlled pairs. And for the head shots, I actually brought my point of aim to the top of this target's head and that pretty well centered them where I needed them. So that was a pretty good guesstimation on the hold. But no problem keeping the body shots in the body, the head shots in the head. I pulled this shot just slightly off to the left, but I think this guy would have still been having a pretty bad day. The Colt just kept doing what Colt 1911s have been doing for over 100 years now, and putting effective shots on target. No problem keeping the body shots in the body. You can see them all right there. No problem keeping the head shots in the head, very close together for those two head shots. And again, I couldn't ask for much more from that Colt 1911. Tanfoglio did very well on this one. We can see here the body group is nicely centered right there. The headshots are where they need to be. So if that lady gets mad at me for using the female hostile aggressor target, at least I can point out some pretty good shots on it. So I don't know if that'll do any good for me or not. But again, all three handguns I thought did very well on that failure drill. So next I moved back to a distance of 15 yards, and from that distance I just started in a ready position and then came up and fired 5 shots in a row from that distance, and I fired them at a medium pace. Now, one thing you'll notice, when I shoot the Iver Johnson pistol, I fire out those 5 shots, then I move to the Colt, and when I come up with the Colt pistol, you'll see kind of a hesitation before the pistol actually fires. Reason being, I was getting used to that trigger on the Iver Johnson, and when I came up with the Colt, I started to press it and it didn't fire, and I had to keep squeezing and keep squeezing. Again, that Colt just has a heavier trigger than the Iver Johnson pistol. Also, I'll point this out now. Again, I was compensating for the hold with the Iver Johnson, and when I fired these shots from 15 yards, I was aiming for right about where the neckline of this sweatshirt is. And when I made the transition to the Colt, just out of habit, I again used my hold right about here, and you'll see those shots are going to hit high. That's the reason. That's a shooter error. That's not a pistol problem. In any case, here's what the 15-yard shooting looked like. And here are the results of that 15-yard shooting. Beginning with the Iver Johnson, we can see another pretty decent group from that distance. Now again, I was holding up in this area to compensate for that drop, but a decent group. I pulled one shot a little bit low. That's clearly my fault. But as I said earlier in the video, in terms of pure mechanical accuracy, that pistol does very, very well. It just needs some attention given to those sights so that it has proper regulation for the ammunition that you're shooting. Moving on to the Colt, again, I've got these shots that are high. That's my fault. Had I been using a proper center of mass hold, this group would have been here. Again, I've got one shot that's a little bit lower than the rest of the group, but this again would have been a very nice group centered in that target, and I would have had one shot down in this area somewhere. So again, the Colt just continues to do very, very well all throughout these tests. It was a pleasure to shoot. Thanks again, ERJG, for letting me borrow that. The Tanfoglio, take a look at this. There's 5 shots from 15 yards that are in a group that is about 1.5 inches, maybe 1 3/4 inches center to center, so a smoking group out of the Tanfoglio at that distance. That's more the performance that I was expecting from that pistol earlier on when I was conducting the bench rest shooting. And finally, here we're seeing it toward the end of my time with it, that we're getting very, very good accuracy from it. Again, no functioning issues throughout those tests. The only issues that I had were the ones that you saw earlier and the one that I mentioned with the Iver Johnson pistol that I took care of with a magazine swap. So now we've come to the point in the testing where I decided it was time to find out if the Iver Johnson pistol is a 20-foot tack driver. The problem is I know that I've got a deviation between my point of aim and my point of impact, so I'm going to have to aim high in order to have a chance of hitting the tack. The problem with hitting high on the tack shot is when I raise the pistol, it blocks my view of the tack. So this is really guesswork and trying to decide exactly where to hold when I'm trying the tack shot under these kind of circumstances. Now I want to show you a couple of things about the target before I get into the actual results of the tack shot. So I decided to use a target like this one for the tack shot. Reason being, it's got some lines on there to help me a little bit. I put the tack dead center in the target and I decided to start things off by aiming about midway between the white bullseye here and the top of the green circle. So I'm right in this area. As I squeeze off my first shot, you'll see the results from that, and then I tried to compensate from it, and here's how it went. Perfect windage, but I'm still hitting low. I'm going to move my hold up to the top of the green circle. That's where the elevation needs to be. Now I just need to straighten it out. Oh! just off of it. Let me show you where I was holding on that. Folks, my hold for this shot was right here. And since I now know where to hold, I'm going to try this one more time with 3 more shots and see if I can drive that thing out of there. So as I said earlier, I cannot see the tack at all when I'm doing this. So I brought my point of aim to right here in order to try to compensate for that difference in the point of aim and point of impact with that Iver Johnson pistol. And here's how the second time through went. Got 2 more shots, folks. Now I got 1 more. Yes! On the third shot of the second try, the Iver Johnson 1911A1 was a tack driver, but it took some work to get it there. And it must have just caught it because we can still see the pin part of the tack right there. Again, I was holding right in this area, so that is 1, 2, and probably 3/4 of an inch that I'm hitting low from that distance of 7 yards. And this was just a pure guesstimation. And overall, once I figured out the hold, the group that I have from that distance is pretty good. So the accuracy of this pistol is not bad at all. And with a little bit of help, it did end up being a tack driver. So yes, in the end, the Iver Johnson 1911A1 ended up being a 7-yard tack driver. So some closing thoughts about these pistols. First off, the Iver Johnson did pretty well, I thought, all throughout this. Other than the functioning issues that were a magazine problem, everything else was perfectly fine. There were no other malfunctions of any sort. The accuracy is very, very good. I'm just concerned about that rear sight. That seems like something that someone at the factory should have figured out. It shouldn't be the end user who gets this pistol and all of a sudden finds out that it's hitting very, very low. And 9 inches low at 25 yards, that's a pretty big deviation. So I'm not sure whether they just put the wrong rear sight on this, the wrong front sight on it. I don't know what happened or what distances they test these pistols at, but I really think that's something that should have been found. That said, this is a sub $700 pistol, and it's pretty decent quality, and for a pistol in this price range, it would be a pretty simple operation to just swap out that rear sight with a higher unit, make up that difference between the point of aim and point of impact, and you have a pretty nice pistol for a relatively good price. There's not a lot I can say about the Colt that I haven't already said. This thing was just a pleasure to shoot. It put bullets where I wanted bullets to go. It is certainly accurate enough for its intended purpose. And ERJG, I promise I'm going to give this back to you someday, but not this day. Very nice pistol, folks. The Tanfoglio is a nice pistol. We saw some very good accuracy from it right there at the end with the 15-yard shooting. It is more or less a competition pistol. It's not something that you would use too often for defensive purposes. And as most of you know, most of my firearms are geared more toward defensive use, military use, law enforcement use whatsoever. So it was fun to shoot this, and it was fun to see the contrast. But this pistol is in the $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 range, and I don't think I'm going to be getting one for my purposes. But if you want a competition pistol chambered for the 38 Super cartridge, you could do a lot worse than this particular handgun. So those are my thoughts on this video, folks. It was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed watching it. As always, make sure you post any questions or comments you have in the comments section. If you purchase anything from Optics Planet, make sure you use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off your purchase from Optics Planet. Also, keep in mind, Targets Online, new channel sponsor. If you need some targets, check out what they have on their website, and I'm sure that they are going to be more than happy to get those to you, and I think you're going to be pretty happy with the targets you get. Last but not least is Hot Munitions. Thanks again to Hot Munitions for providing 2 of these 3 handguns for me to use today. Thanks to them for some of the ammunition that I used today. Again, check out their website. I have the discount code there, HRFUNK10, and if you see anything there, you can use that discount code to save yourself some money. See you next time, folks, and until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.